Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Troutdale Planning Commission for Wednesday, March 12th, 2025. If we could have roll call, please.
Commissioner Minkoff.
Here.
Vice Chair Prickett.
Here.
Commissioner Wilcox.
Here.
Commissioner Allen.
Here.
Chair Stephenson.
Here. All right, at this time, we would like to ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and Commissioner Prickett will be leading us this evening.
I pledge allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there anyone wishing to speak to the Planning Commission this evening on a non-agenda item? And we will start with anyone on Zoom. Seeing none. Anyone in chambers wishing to speak to the Planning Commission this evening on a non-agenda item? Okay, you guys are gluttons for punishment. Okay. All right, next item that we have is approval of minutes for January 8th, 2025 and February 12th, 2025. Any corrections? Start with you, Commissioner Wilcox.
You're sure nobody else wants to take a go at it?
Pardon me?
You're sure no one else wants to take a go at it?
Oh, you can go first, it's okay.
Okay. I'm going by the page numbers on the bottom right. So this will be on page 2 of the packet, page 1 of the minutes, I guess. Down at the bottom, the second paragraph from the bottom that begins Commissioner Wilcox. Fourth line down where it says 1 unit is accessible by an open air staircase. And in parentheses, it says ground floor, unit 205. I think it should say upper floor or second floor, unit 205.
Correct.
So that's the one served by the staircase. And the very next line says under opponents, it wouldn't describe all neighbors. I think that should read, he wouldn't describe. Got that one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. On page 3, about mid-page, the paragraph that begins local ballot measure 26248. 4 lines from the bottom says Associate Planner Meyer stated that the vote was close. It failed by 61 votes. First off, I was going to say that's not exactly in context. Planner Meyer didn't volunteer that information. He was asked what the vote was, and at first he didn't know the numbers, and he came back later in the meeting with the 61 number, which is incorrect. It should be 63. It was 3840 to 3777. And I thought it was kind of irrelevant to say it was close. That doesn't really matter. And that's all I have on that page. And then on page 4 of the packet, toward the bottom under lowercase b paragraph, second line from the bottom starts facade / storefront improvements. Troutdale was awarded $65K from the 2040 Metro Grant. I think the $65K should have a $sign in front of it. And that's all I have for that meeting.
Okay, while we're on that meeting, I'll just go back to page 2 about the 63 votes. I think I asked Mr. Meyer during staff questions what the vote was, what the differential was in the vote. And then you're correct, he responded back later with what the actual number was. but I think it was because I had asked the question of him, so we should probably put that in there. Okay, go ahead. Anyone else for that one, or can we move on to February 12th?
I'm fine with moving on.
Okay. Let's plug along to February 12th. And go ahead, Mr. Wilcox.
Okay, just a couple on that one. Page 7 of the packet. About mid-page where it says closure of hearing. It says, starts out Mrs. Prickett. Prickett is misspelled. You probably should say Commissioner Prickett or Vice Chair Prickett. And the very next paragraph, second line under voting, says Commissioner Anderson, which should be Andrews. And that's all I have for that one.
Any other corrections for February 12th? Okay. So entertain a motion to approve the minutes from January 8th, 2025 as amended.
I move that we approve the minutes of January 8th for the Plan Commission as amended.
Okay,
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes for the January 8th, 2025 meeting as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that carries. Moving on now to February 12th.
I move that we approve the minutes of the Plan Commission's meeting February 12th, 2025 as amended.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes for February 12th, 2025 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, that carries as well. And on to our next agenda item, which is the Citizens Advisory Committee.
Okay, well, thank you guys for.
Good evening, and before you start, I just want to thank you and your entire team for all the work that you do for the city. We all appreciate it, and there's a lot to it, so thank you for your dedication and hard work that you put in.
Well, thank you guys for allowing us to come and talk to you guys a little bit this evening about some of the work the Citizens Advisory Committee has been working on over a year now. My name is Twyla Harrington, and this is Adrian. And Adrian has done much of the work around this project as a member of the CAC. And so a couple weeks ago, about a month or so ago, we presented our draft charter to council, and Chair Stephenson was present also and provided some feedback. So we took that feedback back to our committee, and in your packet today is our revised charter based off of that feedback that you guys provided. Contextually, I wanted to let you guys know that the primary focus of our charter really is to figure out a way how we can gauge if we are being successful with citizens' involvement. And so what we hope to do is over the next couple of years, look at some measures on how we're outreaching to the different groups within the city, and really understand what works best and maybe what doesn't work so well, so that when we have important things that come before us, we use those modalities for the outreach that's happening. Secondary to that, in doing our research, we looked at an article that was put together by the University of Oregon. We looked at our Oregon state law, and then also our city code. And within that, we found that there's three primary areas that where the CAC and the Planning Commission kind of not overlap, but have some touch points. So on this document that you guys have, those are in land use, legislative amendments, and concept development plans. And I know working with Dakota, he had envisioned that what would happen is that the CAC, because we meet before you guys, if there was something that was coming, it would come to CAC if it met the criteria that were laid out within the document, which is not everything. There's just actually a few things that would meet that criteria. And so then we would get citizens' input, and then it would come to Planning Commission, and you guys would have that feedback already as it comes to you for the next steps. So I was hoping you guys were able to take a look at this. We want to get feedback and then your support and answer any questions that you might have regarding this.
Okay, questions, commissioners?
Chair Stephenson, Commissioner Wilcox.
Go ahead, Commissioner Wilcox.
I just had one question on page 2 of the charter, the paragraph entitled Land Use. The CAC shall periodically review the planning process. What do you mean by the planning process?
So ultimately, and that comes out of the existing language that's in the municipal code, by the way. But the idea is looking at the full end-to-end process, mostly weighted towards the front of it. So when changes are made to the development code itself, things that mostly happen in front of you on a monthly basis is not the kind of thing that we're ever going to touch. I know that is the very end of the process. That's the implementation of all of the hard work. What we're looking at is what are some, and when it says looking at it, a focus on improving citizen involvement, it's trying to front load that citizen involvement to much, much earlier. Because by the time we get to applications, it's too late. That ship has, aside from notifying the affected residents and getting public input at a planning commission meeting like this, aside from those two things, that ship has sailed. We're looking at trying to get citizen involvement and input much, much earlier when things are being considered for the development code that might impact applications later on. Does that help, or does that help answer the question?
Commissioner Wilcox, does that help?
Yes, I think so. So just in a very general sense, then, is what you're looking at, is how you're looking at it. Okay, thanks.
And the language is kind of intentionally vague, but one of the reasons why we did want to come here tonight is to reassure everybody involved that in no way, shape, or form will there be anything done at the Citizens Advisory Committee that will impact time-sensitive timelines and applications and that sort of work that is done by the Planning Commission. Not going to happen.
Okay. Questions? No, it's not right now.
No.
Okay, and I guess I'll ask a couple. So, trying to figure out how to do this because recently, I don't know if you know, there's another bill coming down for housing. And so there's a lot of applications that we used to see that we don't see anymore, and there's a new set of regs that's gonna come in, and there's gonna be a lot less that we're gonna see and other people are gonna see. So in a nutshell, it's gonna be things like if you're building middle housing, there is, I want to say no parking standard. Is that right, Erica, I think?
I think right now that's what it's
Yeah,
in these states.
Yeah.
The
I
draft,
haven't
yeah.
read the entire bill.
that there's no parking, no SDCs, things like property tax waivers, all sorts of things that frankly scare me because I think they impact our citizens and our community. And I think when you've got something going in, I think people need to know about it. And I think it's better than just watching something go up alongside you. But those are things where we're not really going to be involved in those processes anymore. Because goal one has really been like, it's kind of Swiss cheese now. Right or wrong, or however you feel about it. I mean, it's just a totally different thing. And so I'm trying to figure out when we have less things for people to see, how do we get them more involved? Because I would love to see more people involved, more comments written, sent in, more people online, more people in chambers, just more people involved in the process. Because like you, I see all the time, somebody's like, what the heck? You know, and it's good or bad. It's kind of like this project over here that was talked about for years. And all of a sudden it's, you know, the backhoe gets out there and people are like, what is going on? Well, you know, we've been talking about it, and I don't even know to some point how much you talk about it or what you can do to fix it. And I know you guys are doing what you can, but it's kind of like, I do feel definitely that the state's kind of come in and kind of taken the city's legs out from underneath us a little bit. I think that's kind of a tough pill to work with. You know, and I agree with you on time-sensitive things, because it's like, how do you do it? And I'm trying to get my head around like who reviews, because like an example would be like Town Center specifically was tasked, TCAB as it's known on the street, was tasked specifically for looking at development proposals for the confluence, right? So they're gonna look at them, and then they look at them actually twice, and then they migrate on to planning. And so it's like, and this is a concept plan, will CAC be involved in that? And at what level would they be involved in that? Because it goes to planning twice, then it goes to, or not planning, I'm sorry, it goes to Town Center twice. They see it, then it gets redone and it comes back. And then it would go to planning, and then it would go to council. So like, just for my own edification, how would something like that be done?
Go ahead.
Based on what, because that specific example was brought up as part of the discussions with Dakota, and my recollection is that in the review and feedback cycle, CAC would kind of be interspersed with the TCAB feedback. And all of our input would, in theory, be all done by the time it gets to planning.
When we've talked as a group, that's how, and this being just a document that kind of holds that process, so that if something ever happened, we have that kind of historical knowledge of how we're gonna proceed. And as we discussed it with Dakota and the rest of the members, it was always that pre-work. So it would actually come to you guys with hopefully some more thoughtful comments and such from the committees, and then come to you guys. And he felt in the way that the two committees would work together, that it should not slow anything. But also, the good thing about the Word document is that it could always change. So if there's something in here, and as we try to put this into practice and we find, wow, this just is not, we'll be reviewing this and touching on it, and, you know, making sure that, you know, we want to stay in our swim lane, But what we want to do is just really figure out the citizens' involvement piece and how we can hopefully get more voices in the room. And that was really the driving iteration of this whole project. And then we found all the legal pieces and we're like, oh, wow, we got a little bit more we need to understand and interpret and put into this package. So we have all the pieces in one document. And then after we implement and we reassess on a yearly basis, then we'll change it and modify as needed, especially as things change and there may be less and less that we're going to be asked to give feedback on, it sounds like.
Well, go ahead, you had a question, sir? Commissioner Allen?
Yeah, so I was just going to point out that what we've been seeing is that as time goes on, we're seeing less local control, less citizen involvement, and more centralized planning, state control. And so by the time it gets to us, it's already been decided and we've got a choice of A or B. We don't really have a choice. We can do what they want or we can do what they want. You choose. And so I wish there was a way that CAC could keep tabs on what all the government entities above us are doing, because each one of them is adding their own stuff to it, and we get very little say in our communities. And I personally am not a fan of that, but if we can have somebody have eyes on it, then maybe they could warn us.
That's great feedback. I really like that. And I think, right, if we have a voice and we're having less local control with that voice, then it's a great thought of how do we then bring that voice to where the decisions are being made.
If I may chime in here, it's Commissioner
Absolutely,
Wilcox.
Commissioner.
Thank you. Being on both committees, I have firsthand knowledge of what's happening there. And I think part of the discussion is the practical, actually day-to-day operations, let's say, of the CAC. The CAC is trying to identify how best to communicate with the citizens of Troutdale. We have been discussing for some time making a better presence online, having text messages, trying to figure out if we can do in-person meetings and so on, because the idea that we're trying to solidify is the flow of information two ways, both ways. So the idea is, it seems that because when I read from the original planning documents of the city of Troutdale, the CAC is mandated to give reviews of the planning commission meetings, here I'm reading, to ensure community input and guidance and considered in the planning process. So that's one direction. The other direction is getting that information from the planning commission, from Chris Ann, from whomever is handing out the information, that the forward-looking calendar being provided to Twyla, for example, on the CAC so that it can be disseminated, and figuring out a path to then get that information out to the public. Because I think it will address exactly what you're saying, Tanny, which is citizens won't be then surprised, or shouldn't be so surprised and irritated when they see something happening that they didn't have any information about. The idea is, if we can disseminate that information to citizens, they will then be apprised of what's going on. Hopefully that solicits more engagement from those citizens. So right now, I have to say that the CAC keeps getting kind of rebuffed by city staff, by potentially members of the planning commission, because people are saying, well, the CAC shouldn't get involved in X. The CAC should not get involved in Y. And the CAC is scrambling, trying to figure out, well, what is the official line of communication? Who's going to be providing that information to who? And then what is the process of disseminating that to the public?
Okay, I'll just respond to some of that. I don't know that anybody on this panel's rebuffing anyone. It's just when it comes down to things like applications, the notice requirements, the state requirements, when packets go out, how hearings are done, all of that is dictated by state law. And so it's not like we have really any flexibility in that process.
Right. So what I'm saying is how do we get the CAC involved in that? How? That's the question we're struggling with.
Involved in the planning process?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and which is one of the reasons why the focus of the final product that we've come up with, like I said earlier, is front loading the involvement. Because by the time things have timelines, it's too late. But to the other point that Commissioner Minkoff did say is an important one, in that the goal here is to foster communication in both ways, because and I give a great deal of credit to city staff. Since when we first started discussing all of this, in the planning office was in a bit of a turbulent state, as you remember from about 2 years ago. And so there were some communications breakdowns around that time. Since then, there has been a remarkable increase in stability, and a remarkable increase in some fantastic ideas of having information flowing out from the city. There's a lot more wonderful stuff on the website. There's stuff that is being posted on Facebook on a more regular basis. There's a lot of good information there, and we're wanting to, that's part of our review is, with city staff is to pull all of that information together and enhance that. But to Commissioner Minkoff's point, and to ping off of what you said earlier, Chair, is that there's a lot of decisions that the city has to make where our hands are tied. And to date, we have not, as a city, we have not done a terribly good job of communicating to the public as to how and why those hands are tied. Later in the agenda is another good example with all of the CFAC stuff coming down the pipe. And it's like, to a large extent, our hands are tied. So when people come in and express frustration about this, part of that is communicating the why. And that's what we're trying to do, is establish those mechanisms, establish the pipelines of information, and also periodically do checks to see how effective those pipelines are. That's really the goal.
And I was going to say, I couldn't agree more with that, because I think that's what we need to do. I think that's what the community expects. It's like when we talk about the planning process, and this is just where I'm trying to go here, is a lot of this is extremely structured and controlled by state law and doesn't get deviated from, can't be deviated from. And we have specific timelines that we have to meet, or we are in a swamp.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
I think what Chair Tanny is saying here is that by the time it gets to us, it's almost already too late.
Right, which
And
is
so,
which is exactly what I said earlier. So
I don't know what your thoughts are on my comment that if we could front load and get in front of what the state is doing, the county, Metro, TriMet, because they're pretty much telling us what we're going to do.
right.
And they're not leaving us a lot of options.
Yeah. So one of the chief examples where this will manifest is when staff initiate things like really big reviews that affect the development code, big type 4 stuff. That's the kind of stuff where there's a much longer timeline there. There's a lot of steps, there's work sessions, there's multiple reviews, there's lots of pieces in there, and that's where early days in those processes and those kinds of applications is where CAC can possibly provide some input.
Is it, once you get to application, that's when it can hit a quasi-legal state, right? Depending
Once
on
it
the-
hits here,
Yeah,
it's,
depending on the type.
you know, we've done the notices before we see it. Okay, so we have a timeline, basically goes back, and we have so long to hear the case, so we have to start working backwards from there.
Yeah.
And so I guess what I would say is like a type 4 code amendment, I would welcome it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and that's the
And
really the
so I
place
guess
where
the
we
question is,
start.
how would you envision that? Because like, we work in the code with staff, and so we go through it and we're like, well, if we said this, we could do this, we could do this. Would you envision like a joint work session?
I think what Dakota had mentioned and our group was hoping was that Dakota would bring a presentation to our group and get feedback from our group. And then he would bring that feedback to your group. And so not a joint session, but just the opportunity in those bigger, and we purposely actually took out that type 4 language in the document. We did have that before, just because we wanted to make it more broad and in those projects. So he would bring a presentation to us, we would give feedback, and then those thoughts from our group would be then presented to you when he brings it to your group. So, and then if there was an opportunity or something, you know, certainly that was more in depth and there was more collaboration, certainly we could come and present or talk more to you guys. But that was how we had envisioned it. So just a formal process of our feedback going from one meeting and then being presented within the context of the next meeting.
Okay.
The other thing I did want to point out, just because I wanted to give a distinct shout out to Commissioner Wilcox, is that section there on the charter referring to the concept development plans. As Commissioner Wilcox thankfully pointed out to us, that is a direct reference to section 5.420 procedures A in the development code. So there is a reference to CAC review for concept development plans in the TDC today.
No, I know that,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying in
I just wanted to give
particular
thanks to Paul for
because
that.
you had a series of people build a town center plan. They worked on it since 2017. The council said, okay, let's have a group because they've got all this history. They need to review this thing. And so that's how that all came about.
Yeah,
Yeah, and a few years, no, can't remember how long I've been on this committee, many years. And it did come, but there was, and we gave comment, but there wasn't like a formal way then for that to carry forward. And so this, that's a great example of how they came and presented and we gave feedback. And then this just shows that context of that, great, we got citizens' feedback, and so now let's ensure that feedback and input carries on to the next group who would want to hear some of that.
Okay, so if you got feedback, would that be presented in the form of testimony on behalf of the CAC?
Yes, I would like to chime in here.
You may.
Thank you. I see the CAC's comments or recommendations about proposals to the Planning Commission coming in the form within the Planning Commission staff report for the project. So under, you know, our public comment section within our staff report, it would say Community Advisory Committee, and then it would list out the, you know, their review comments, because they are a reviewing committee. Now, if you are a reviewing committee, that's just what you are, a reviewing committee. You can make recommendations to Planning Commission, they can accept them, they cannot accept them. But since you have that review authority in our code, they wouldn't have legal standing.
Yeah, they would have. Right?
No, they wouldn't,
They wouldn't?
they wouldn't, because they're a review authority under our code. So that you would be receiving their comments and considering them, just like you do at all
Okay,
planning commission.
so they wouldn't have appeal rights?
Correct.
No.
Okay.
No.
All right, and so
And I
like,
talked to our city attorney about that.
and so comments that you receive from a citizen would just come in the packet and may or may not be included in your review.
Right, one would hope that we're relatively comprehensive in at least referring and possibly summarizing those comments, but yes, I mean, they may, depending on the discussions within the CAC, they may or may not be included in our committee comments. Now,
Yeah, I'm just clarifying that a citizen may make comments that would be part of the record, but would not be part of your recommendation.
right. And one of the things that we have that has been part of the discussion more than once on a couple different issues, just in our meetings, is that we always encourage citizens who feel particularly strongly about a given topic or a given issue to, in addition to coming and talking to us, also going to and testifying directly at planning commission or city council or both, depend as appropriate, because because ultimately, when it comes to the citizen involvement pieces that are defined in goal 1, every volunteer committee that the city has is at some level a citizens advisory committee. We are all citizens, we all volunteer, we are all part of this process. And what we're wanting to do at a 10,000-foot level is to sort of bring together the efforts that everybody is doing and trying to get sort of a grand picture that we can report to each other as well as city council as to how effective we're being at it.
And I would say, just as another note, when I look through the 70 pages of stuff that we're working on after this, I can tell you that this is going to, some of these actions are going to prevent the community from getting some of the businesses and services that it desperately needs. And I can say that equivocally without a doubt. And I think something that people could do that would really help, call our representatives, testify against or for some of these bills if you believe in them. But this is like, if I was making cookies in a big factory, this is what it would look like.
So, Kenny,
Commissioner Minkoff.
thank you. With all due respect, which I have a great amount of respect for you, this is the kind of rebuffing that I was talking about. When you say the CAC really can't get involved in this level of review and comment, that's exactly what the CAC has been facing. We are struggling to try to adhere to city council decades ago and Oregon law that has mandated a CAC. So I think that Adrian and Twyla are coming to you also, not just to report, but to say, how are we supposed to fulfill? Even if they're not asking, I'm going to ask the question. How are we supposed to fill what city council has mandated the CAC to do and that Oregon State is mandating for every jurisdiction?
Okay, to clarify, did I say that they could not be involved?
You didn't say they couldn't. What you said was that this is going to cause great delays in anything that needs to be decided upon.
He's confusing the bill, your commentary on what the state.
Yeah,
I think you're
think-
confusing my commentary about the CFEC bill.
Yeah,
Are you talking about what I said just a couple of minutes ago?
Yes,
yeah,
I misunderstood?
That was a different issue.
yeah, yeah, that's completely, I mean, what Chair was saying is, at least by me, completely understood. And I've said this a couple times already, but I want to reiterate here, is that the how we do this is gonna be a work in progress. We know that. We're not coming here looking for distinct answers as to the how. I mean, this is going to be something that we work together with all of the committees and work with city staff, and staff is gonna be a critical interaction here, because a lot of the public messaging pipelines are in the hands of city staff. So we're gonna be working with everybody on this. And I do not see any massive outstanding conflicts or questions as far as how this is gonna work. I think we've got a good path forward. We're establishing the paths of communication. And my primary goal here is to just make sure and reassure the members of the Planning Commission that it is not our goal, and we will not get in your functional way.
We just want to increase communication and collaboration.
Now,
Commissioner Prickett.
staff gives us a running calendar usually of what's coming up and what's been done already. Would access to that calendar, having you receive a copy of our calendar ahead of time?
I'm not even sure, probably for my own
That would
curiosity,
give you
but
an
not
idea
for
what's
the,
coming before
yeah.
us.
To a certain extent, Dakota's our committee liaison, and
yeah.
Dakota does really a very good job of keeping us in the loop on a month-by-month basis, the big stuff that is coming. And even in a lot of cases, the little stuff that are the littler stuff, I should say. You guys don't do little unimportant things. But the littler things that are the more routine, for lack of a better term, decisions and applications that are coming in front of Planning Commission. So Dakota does a fantastic job keeping us in the loop. So when there is big stuff coming, and there is big stuff coming, that CAC may want to provide some input on, some feedback on, and possibly even start asking questions as to, are we gonna suggest to city staff that some of this stuff should be amplified in our communications out to the public, via Facebook posts or via article in the Champion or such, that things like implications of upcoming state bills that are, or CFAC stuff that is affecting, should somebody put some effort and money into a write-up in the Champion or a Facebook post or any number of other things. Those are the kinds of two-way suggestions that we're looking at making and seeing then what the impact on future attendance and comments and all of that stuff to see if it's doing any good.
Commissioner Allen.
I firmly believe that if the public knew what was being planned for them, they would be outraged. Unfortunately, what Tanny said was true. By the time they see it, so much damage is already done, and it's almost too late. And so I do firmly encourage more eyes on it, more involvement. The earlier, the better.
I don't even know if this is possible, but you know what would be helpful, I think, for a lot of us? Is if you guys were able to get access to the council's calendar. Because so many things go to the council that none of us ever see. And I think it'd kind of be great to have a little bit of heads up, whoa, this one's coming up in 2 weeks or whatever, rather than waiting for the agenda to pop out.
That's great
Yeah.
feedback.
Yeah, that's
You know, if they'd
something,
be willing to let that hit the street,
yeah,
or at least to the committee level, I think would be very helpful.
absolutely,
Don't
absolutely.
be too surprised if you're warning us going, whoa, look what's coming.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely love to get like a regular report or something from city manager Ray Young and ultimately his successor, that gives a little more far-reaching picture into what council has coming. I mean, especially based on the discussions last night, I mean, we have a pretty good idea what council is gonna be doing for about the next 8 to 9 months, but, 'cause they're gonna be busy. But yeah, 100%, I mean, that would be something that, and that, again, is part of the communications, is effective communication from the committees back and forth to staff as to what's going on.
And I'll just tell you some of the steps that have been taken, and I will just say this about Community Development Director Palmer. And this is no disrespect to any of the 8 community development directors that I've worked with before her, but I would say that the process of getting information out and communicating is the best that I've seen in many, many years. Okay, and I think it's great for everybody. And then you just look at little things like that the planning commission's done is if there's a land use application, we mandate that there's a street sign. If the notice is 250 feet, we made it 500. If it's 500, we made it 1,000. You know, we see this too, and we're trying to do our part
Yeah,
to make the system
absolutely.
better.
Absolutely. and that's
Because
greatly
we also don't
appreciated.
believe in working in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Yep.
Commissioner Prickett.
I was on the CAC when I first started, and I think that this is the proper place when we have code changes, transportation plan, anything like that, that you can review ahead of time and give us feedback. That helps us do our job better. So more eyes on anything, I'm all for it. Because like Tanya said, we don't see it all. And we'd appreciate anything you guys can feed us, and we appreciate everything that you do already, so. I do like it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Any other comments, commissioners?
Chair Stevenson, Commissioner
Yes.
Wilcox, I was just going to mention, as far as keeping track and monitoring of what's coming down the pike out of Salem, the League of Oregon Cities has people that they go through bills with a fine-tooth comb. I mean, they are very thorough from what I've read of their work. So they're working on behalf of the cities.
I have some recollection that somebody in the city regularly meets with the league. Am I
Ray, I
dreaming that?
believe.
Maybe
It would
Ray?
most likely be the city manager.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
Counselors once a year, Ray more often.
right.
Anything, Commissioner Minkoff?
No, just an apology for my misunderstanding earlier.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right,
Appreciate
thank
your
you
time.
very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you for the
Thank
work you
you.
guys do. And next up is the Historic Landmarks Commission, Aaron Janssens and Nick Grimston.
Good evening.
Share my screen.
More of a collaborative relationship building and communication and building all of that good stuff that they just started for us. So we're going to build on that theme. Hopefully it will be a little faster, we'll go smoother, and we just would like to give you an update. Oh, sorry, do I need to say my name for the council thing? Aaron Janssens, Chair of the Historic Landmarks Commission.
Nick Ramstead, Assistant Planner.
we're here tonight to discuss communicating with you and kind of giving you a heads up about the Historic Landmarks Commission starting to, well, we've been working on for quite a number of years, but trying to formulate with the help of staff his historic district for downtown Troutdale.
You could also say this is a briefing based on the title. I didn't say that. So project background. I'm sorry. In the fall of 2024, staff presented a street topper concept to the HLC that was consistent with the downtown area's tourism and visitor branding efforts. While the committee liked the street topper concept, it was thought that the design reading historic Troutdale was too blanket of an approach. The sign toppers just said historic Troutdale. Throughout our meetings and discussion, we decided we wanted something that captured a little more rich of the culture in Troutdale. So we discussed, we wanted the topper to call out a particular local historic district, in this case Hungry Hill, which is Troutdale's first plat and first edition, or first and second plats. And staff members returned to HLC in late 2024 and stated that the committee's idea is feasible. However, it would take a bit of work because the city's development code does not have criteria for determining and establishing a local historic district. So these are two different chapters of code language in the development code related to historic designation and the Historic Landmark Committee. The first one is in the overlay chapter, section 4.200, historic landmark protection. This is from the purpose statement. The purpose of this section is to provide procedures to identify and designate and preserve historic resources, including buildings, structures, sites, objects, or districts, which are historical, architectural, or cultural significance to the community, and to provide appropriate means for their protection and preservation consistent with state preservation laws. The City and the Historic Landmark Commission shall support the enforcement of all state laws relating to historic preservation. Obviously, I highlighted a couple words. The purpose of this section is to provide procedures to identify and designate districts. And if we go down to chapter 6, which is the application section of the development code, Historic Landmark Commission has a section for applications. In the purpose statement of this section, I won't read the whole thing, but I'll read the first two lines. The purpose of the Historic Landmark section is to provide procedures to identify, designate, and preserve historic resources, including buildings, structures, sites, objects, or districts. So going back to the application section, there are 4 types that HLC can do, or 4 types that are listed out in the development code. So the first one being historic landmark designation. Second, removal of historic landmark designation. 3, alterations to a historic landmark. And 4, demolition or relocation of a historic landmark. Despite the code recognizing that identifying and designating a historic district in the purpose sections of 2 distinct chapters of the code, there is no guidance on how to establish a new historic district. So that was a kind of a problem we've identified for HLC trying to navigate how to establish a district. And the next steps we've identified for the commission would be 1, draft code language to amend the development code that creates criteria to establish historic districts. So to be clear right now, we're working on criteria for the establishment of a district right now, not the district itself. That will come at a later time. The process would be staff drafts language, HLC would review. It'd go to CAC for review and discussion. It'd be brought to PC in June as a type 4 application. And then you guys would see that as much as you'd like. And then that would hopefully result in a council recommendation around July. And then step 2 would be after the code is amended, we'd make an application for a Hungry Hill Historic District. It follows just about the same exact process as number 1.
Thank you for putting CAC in there.
Yeah, of course. So any questions
live
you guys
longer.
have or discussion items, we're happy to take.
Commissioner Allen?
I just want to say I love the idea, and I think this is great that you're looking into it and bringing it forward. You know, you always wish we did this sooner, so, but I'm very appreciative.
We've been working on it off and on for several years, kind of pre-COVID even, and I must say that it took really, that we got a really good staff team to help support and make it happen, and really listen to the HLC of the difference between simply a sign topper in an area saying historic Troutdale versus designating the very specific historic district that Hungry Hill is. And I think that that's important to the city of Troutdale and citizens to help really identify that, signify that, and I think it will hopefully bring some benefits with it.
Yeah, I don't think it was on our radar, but I'm sure glad it was on yours.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to seeing it. I
Good.
really am.
that's
It'll be
great.
great.
That's great.
And again, couldn't happen sooner, but it's nice it's happening now.
Yeah, it really is, and I really want to give credit to Erica and Nick.
We
So,
do have a great staff.
yeah, we do. Okay, Tammy?
So for clarification, we're gonna create a historic district and then Hungry Hill would be like an overlay within the historic district?
The Hungry Hill Historic District is a specific district with boundaries that we're still kind of working out. It's roughly from about in between second and third, it starts, I think, in between maybe like Kibling, it kind of jogs over to Sandy, up Buxton, up to about 8th or thereabouts, and then cuts over to Harlow, down to approximately 5th, and then back over to Sandy.
So Hungry Hill will be the district.
Yes.
So I guess what I'm wondering is, what about downtown? Are we gonna try to address that?
Well,
Because we've talked about that before.
yeah, we have. Hungry Hills is a very specific area because of the workforce in the downtown area that was at the meatpacking and the woolery and and because of that, it was noon hour that people would then, the bell would ring and people would walk home up the hill to eat either lunch or dinner. And so that's how it got the nickname of Hungry Hill. And so that was the first known kind of name or nickname that we're aware of that the city had. So that's what's come to the attention of the HLC anyway, is that is the first kind of name that we had, and that was for that specific area, both the first and second plats.
And once we have consensus on boundaries, we'll share that with you and get feedback to take into consideration.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I'm just thinking while we're at it,
Yeah,
why
yeah.
not just,
Yeah.
you know, and
Well, we'd love to follow up with a second, but I think that Hungry Hill has been worked on and researched so thoroughly that I'd hate to delay it again and then have something else happen and it not happen for another X number of years. So we've got the momentum now. I think it's a good time to get it done. And then we're very happy to look at another district to expand and simply, especially the downtown area, I think would be really nice. But it will require some research and extra work.
No, I love it.
No, I love it.
okay.
I have a question, Chair Stevenson.
Wilcox.
Does HLC have an inventory of properties that you consider historic? I mean, there's some fairly new construction within that geographic area, I suspect.
There is. It's still over 50% over 50 years old. And technically, to be historic, a property either needs to be of a certain age, at least a minimum age of 50 years old, or be historically significant in some other manner, either through the activities that occurred there, the person that lived there, some type of unique quality or character that happened at that property. But to your point, Paul, we've lost numerous historic structures or structures that were historic, but not necessarily landmarks, but definitely qualified as historic structures. So we'd like to start having people more identify and value, come to value some of that before it's all gone.
And I don't mean to pour acid on this or anything, but are you aware that the new bill coming out of Salem allows for the demolition of historic structures to put up middle housing without review, correct? Yes.
Yeah,
I'll time myself to it.
all kinds of great things coming out of Salem lately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see things like that and I just cringe and just like,
I know.
why, you know?
Yeah. Is there any, this is off topic, but is there any pushback? Is there any coalition or organization or lobbyists kind of pushing back and trying to, especially advocating for smaller towns against some of these issues?
I guess I will just say, I would think that Troutdale would probably qualify for a creative code merit badge, wouldn't you say? No?
Sure.
Because, and I say that because I think we go through this and we try to, as much as we possibly can, work through every word and try to get it the best for the community that we can. Would you disagree with that?
I do not disagree with that. I do.
And so we're not model code people. I think Nick can also attest to that. But I also think that our representatives, frankly, could help us more than what they do. I think sometimes you might need GPS to find your way back home.
Well, I know that when that initial one passed for the housing for any town over the population of 10,000, I thought was extremely low, and I thought excessive for meddling into what they wanted to do, what the agenda was. So I thought it was I think it's a very small town.
Part of our problem is that we're linked with Portland. We're in the metro.
Not because of Metro.
Yeah.
And if we were further away from there, we probably wouldn't have this issue. But because we're linked to that metro area.
I think Lake Oswego opts out. Lake Oswego and Westland, but there's, probably money involved.
Yeah, they have issues that we don't, they have better issues that we have.
They have money. Yes, but it's funny how that works.
Yes.
Yeah.
Commissioner Allen?
Yeah, unfortunately, it'll be gone before they realize what they did.
Yeah, it's really sad.
Commissioner
But
Wilcox?
we do what we can, and we really appreciate all that you do on the planning commission, because I know you guys
And we appreciate you greatly.
you have a tough job, so we appreciate it.
Commissioner Wilcox?
No, nothing else.
Okay. Commissioner Minkoff?
I have nothing, thank you.
Okay, and is there any members of the public that would like to speak to this item? Unmute yourself, this is your chance. None. Okay. In chambers? No? All right, see?
All right, thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much. Okay, and now that we've primed the pump. Do you want to take a break first?
Sorry, Erica.
I'm going to leave that up to you, Chair. I'm ready to go.
You guys need a break or you good to go?
I think I can make it.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead with item number C, which is climate-friendly, equitable communities. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening, Commissioners. Erica Palmer, Community Development Director. Tonight, I'm going to be giving you an update about the climate-friendly, equitable communities work that is currently taking place, that we've been doing for the past year here. And a lot of this tonight you have already heard, but then at the end of this presentation, I'll ask for some feedback and we'll decide how we want to move forward this evening. So the goals for tonight is to provide a quick update on the amendment package that was in your packet, to seek feedback from the commission this evening, and then review with the commission some needed revisions. So what is in your packet tonight is the first, I'd like to say it's the first rough draft of the code package amendment. So I know we all know what CFAC is, but for the general public who might be watching this evening, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the climate-friendly, equitable communities work. So the CFAC is the Climate-Friendly Equitable Community Rule Program that was set by the state of Oregon, and it applies to all regions and populations over 50,000 and cities within the metro area. And these rules, they aim to reduce climate pollution. They aim to provide more housing and transportation options, increase housing choices, and create more equitable outcomes for Oregonians. These are essentially a lot of parking reforms for cities throughout the state. And these parking reforms were set in two phases. You had Parking Reform A, and those went into effect on December 31st of 2022. And then you had Parking Reform B, which took effect, June 30th of 2023. But DLCD, the Department of Land Conservation and Development, that is the Oregon state agency that oversees land use planning, they granted Troutdale a 2-year extension to implement these rules. So Parking Reform A, really quick, because I know we have seen these slides multiple times throughout this past year, but Parking Reform A really talks about reducing parking minimums for specific types of uses. That includes affordable housing, childcare facilities, different sizes of residential units, and then no more than multifamily units can have no more than one parking space per unit. Parking Reform A, cities can't require garages or carports, but certainly if a developer wants to build a garage, or if a property owner wants to put in a carport, they certainly can. We need to provide, large parking lots will need to provide like solar and trees, and have different walkway features that are beneficial to the pedestrian and the street access. And then we need to be able to really think about the ease of conversion of existing parking lots that are underutilized. And that's the same with underutilized on-street parking as well. Parking Reform B. Now these are kind of bigger, broad policy options that cities had to choose. And cities had 3 options to choose from. And the first option was just to outright repeal minimum parking requirements for the entire city. There are many cities in Oregon that have taken this approach. Like Oswego, Tualatin, Westland, Milwaukee, Tigard, Beaverton, Millersburg, they're all listed here. And probably, actually, some more cities might have implemented this since the slide was developed. Parking Reform B, the second option is the Fair Policies option, and it provides kind of a menu of certain things cities can do, and cities would need to implement at least 2 of these options on this list. And then we have option 3, which is called reducing red tape, and it's, this option is just creating additional list of menu items that cities would need to repeal parking minimums for. So when we talked about this past year with the Planning Commission, we felt, well, we asked the question, right? We want to get back to that question. What would be best for the Troutdale residents of Troutdale? That's our goal. We want to look at CFEC through that lens. And in doing so, this fair option 2, fair policies option really stood out. And I had a couple questions, and we had our representative from DLCD was here last March, and he gave a presentation, and we asked him, so looking at option 2, the city doesn't have we don't have a commercial parking lot now. Could we develop a program for a tax on commercial parking lots, and would that kind of check the box per se for that requirement? And DLCD staff said yes, as long as you develop a program that could be implemented in the future, that would check that box, and that one would be done. And then going through these options, I know that Planning Commission, we all decided, well, let's reach out to the businesses here in Troutdale that employ 50 or more people. And staff, we did that work. We did a survey. We have about 16, and I actually need to run the 2025 numbers of businesses that employ 50 or more people, and we asked them, how many employees ride or take an alternative mode of transportation every day to work. And we got about 6 responses back. And the responses that we received, they had very little employees. They didn't have many employees taking alternative modes of transportation to work on a daily basis and utilizing parking. And I brought that table back to the Planning Commission. I didn't bring it back tonight, but we can certainly look at it again if the commission would like. But I know that probably half of the 6 or 7 respondents that responded to the survey, they had 1 or 2 employees taking I shouldn't say public transportation, but taking alternative modes of transportation to work on a daily basis.
Oh, Erica, excuse me.
Yes, Paul.
Could you go back to that slide? On number 3, you should probably specify that the $50 stipend is per month.
Yes, I will. I will change that going forward. So when we see the slide again in the future, which I'm sure we will, it will say that, Paul. Thank you very much for bringing that to my attention.
Okay.
So this new rule language, if you really want to get down and dirty and read all the Oregon administrative rules about CFAC, you can find it in the Oregon Transportation Planning Rule, which we typically call the TPR. And it's in Oregon Administrative Rules, Chapter 660, and it's Division 12. In your staff report this evening, what I did is I created a matrix of those TPR standards. I'm gonna find it here. So it has the TPR, requirements that CFAC is requiring on one side of the table. And then on the other side of the table, I listed how we're proposing to meet that requirement. So this little matrix in your packet is really a code audit to making sure that we're hitting all the specified rules in the TPR that relate to CFAC. Also in your packet, so after this matrix, we have what I like to call, as I said, the first rough draft of the code amendment package. I have sent the staff I have sent this draft to the DLCD because I asked them for a courtesy review. And they're more than happy to give feedback to Troutdale before we enter the public hearings process and before we officially notice them, because I want everything buttoned up. I don't want anything coming from the state as soon as we get to, the last step in the process. And so I'm getting in some comments from the state, and then also I provided it to our legal team and to several different staff members in our organization. For example, since we're creating a new chapter to tax commercial parking lots, I sent that off to Eric Mueller to look at and to make sure that we were meeting the requirements of that his department would need to look at in collecting a future tax. So what I have here for next steps, I would like to bring a final review packet or package of these draft amendments to the Planning Commission at our next meeting in April. That would be April 9th, with a caveat that I did not add on the slide, and my apologies to the CAC people who are not here this evening, but I would also be giving a short presentation about CFAC to the CAC in April, and they meet before April 9th, before the Planning Commission does. And I have given our CAC a briefing about CFAC during this past year. So they know what we're working on, they know what's coming down the pipeline. So I just want to make that very clear and transparent, that they do know, and I will be meeting with them before our meeting on April 9th. And then what I have here is we have some tentative public hearing dates with the Planning Commission in May. And then we're looking at some tentative public hearing dates with City Council in June to ultimately meet our deadline date of June 30th, 2025. So this slide just shows you some additional edits to this document that will need to be made. Oops. And they're generic. There's some draft language in here that may repeat itself. It may be when you change when you change a section of code, it may not get reflected in another section of the code, and I have to go back now and kind of make sure that certain sections are in agreement with one another. And that's kind of always the challenging thing when you change code, because something might be hiding in another chapter. So here's, a list of maybe like a half a dozen things that have come up within the past week, with myself further refining and going through the code, having an additional set of eyes on it through DLC doing their courtesy review, and then having kind of other staff members within our organization taking a good solid look on it. So I want all eyes. The more eyes on a document, the better. That's what I always say. And then what I plan to do here shortly is to notice this after all these kind of edits are tidied up here within the next week and a half. I will notice the state to give them a 35-day notice hearing. And once I do that, kind of this final rough draft of this code will be, up on the site. So up on our project website. So if anybody from the Troutdale community wants to look at the work that's been done, they can certainly look at this work and then provide comments, if they so choose to. So with that, I'm going to leave it up to Planning Commission this evening whether or not we want to kind of go through these code edits tonight, or we can wait till next month. Or if you've gone through it and you have some questions, I can certainly crossing my fingers, I can certainly answer those questions. I don't know how, I would like to know what the commission would like to do process-wise.
Let's take some questions first, then we can determine our path forward. Questions from the commission? Okay. Commissioner Allen?
I haven't made all my notes, but I always worry about unintended consequences, like when we force people to open their doors into the east wind, that's actually having a reverse effect on being friendly to the climate, just because of the heat loss. And so there has to be an ability to account for that, or do variations when those occur.
Commissioner Wilcox?
I've actually got a whole slew of questions and edits, typos. So I don't know whether you want to go through page by page tonight or how you want to handle it.
You know what would be a good thing, Paul? If you have those comments and typos and whatnot, if you could send those to me this week, I will make sure that they get incorporated into the next draft.
And I guess mine are more global. The first one being the map that they sent you, as part of the packet,
Yes.
the one that they did with the CFEC area. I wasn't able to print it off, but there's sections here that are, listed in orange that are beyond a half mile.
So if the property touches the half mile from the frequent transit service area, it's the entire property. And some of these properties, and some of them really don't matter because they will never have employment uses or any type of use on them.
Well, like an example, I'm looking at what am I gonna be? I'm gonna be the southeast quadrant here.
Okay.
Right? And as you look at it, you've got the Columbia River Highway that goes down, turns kind of by Jackson Park, and then heads towards the bridge. You with me there?
Yeah.
Right in this area.
Right.
Yeah. So the half mile kind of dead ends midway into that. So those properties that are along the Columbia River Highway there, from Jackson Park to the bridge, on both sides actually are beyond a half mile.
So, yes, and so the CFAC parking delineation area is, I want to back up here, it's a half mile from a frequent transit corridor.
Right?
We have only one of those corridors in Troutdale at the moment, and that is bus route 77.
Right?
And then it also includes a quarter-mile buffer from the town center. So you see the red here is our town center boundary.
Yeah.
So
It's a quarter mile from anywhere in the town center.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like a mile from the actual bus stop at this point. 3/4 of a mile for sure.
Right, but those properties are still within a quarter mile from the town center.
But I mean, it's kind of, I understand that, they're a quarter mile from the town center, but you're gonna have to take food and water with you when you go to get on the bus, because it's gonna take you that long to walk. I mean, it's beyond a half mile.
I will take a look at our GIS.
You see what I'm saying?
I will double check.
Okay,
And yes, I will double check.
see what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay, and since we're on that subject, I was looking at it and it talks about frequent transit route, right? And it says in the code, the CFEC code talks about once an hour. So I go look at TriMet, who's our service provider, and their definition was buses or max trains that arrive every 15 minutes or less for most of the day, every day.
Yep, and I had this conversation even prior to me working
Okay.
a couple of years ago now. I had this conversation with DLCD because DLCD, the CFAT definition of frequent transit does not mesh with TriMet's definition.
I just want to, before you, this is TriMet's definition. It's consistent with the State Department of Transportation's definition and consistent with the National Department of Transportation definition.
So why is
Go ahead.
So LCDC is different?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Okay.
It was adopted that way in the rules.
Yeah.
I
know you're the messenger,
I know,
but it's
I
like,
know.
it-
I
know.
don't understand.
I guess from an application standpoint of the code, right? I'm looking at this and I'm like, how do we even do this when the definition isn't consistent with any other legal definition that we're talking about?
I hear you loud and clear because like I said, I had this conversation with them and tried to argue it.
Commissioner Allen?
So kind of along with your point is I used to commute by bus to work. And buses ran on the hour for me. And should I accidentally leave work too late and miss my connecting bus, I'm walking home. And I gotta tell you, 9 months out of the year, our weather ain't pretty. So that's not fun, it's in the dark. So, you know, we don't really have the system in place to do what we're trying to do, so we're forcing people to do it. And I noticed that when I go to my mom's town, most often, I'm not taking my car to go to the store because it's flat, it's dry, it's more of a hassle for me to get in the car, start it, go there, park it, than it is for me just to walk there, because the stores are close. Well, how close is the store in Troutdale? And how far do you have to go? And how fit are you to walk uphill to do it? Not everybody's genetically blessed.
Well, and not everybody has an electric wheelchair either.
That's true.
They either have a walker,
And it
Or
sucks
work
when the
from
battery
wheelchair.
runs out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we could put like a lift
Charging.
on 257. Oh, we can't. We won't have room. I was gonna say we could put something like a run up 257.
What are they called? Like a funicular or?
Yeah.
I feel like we're having to force it because it's not practically doable.
Well, and I feel like it's not, I agree with you, it doesn't seem, we finally got a bus that goes down Cherry Park, north and south, finally, after I lived here 43 years, and we finally got a bus. But it's still not, for me to go somewhere, I have to transfer at least twice to get somewhere. I mean, I can walk to the store because I'm close by,
Right.
but if I was living down here, I'd have to walk up the hill in the windstorm, and then walk down the hill, and hopefully if I have towing something, it doesn't go faster than I'm going.
Right.
Because I see people carrying bags, heavy bags, down that hill.
And if you have to have two jobs or pick up children by a certain time, you
Right,
ain't
you're not
making
gonna
it.
make it.
No.
I again rode the bus to work from here to Beaverton. And it was almost a 2.5 hour bus ride.
You ever notice that oftentimes the bus is mostly empty and you're starting and you're stopping?
Yeah,
That's gotta be a huge emissions problem. Let alone the traffic obstacles we put in place of cars. And I gotta tell you, from an engineering perspective, I don't know if you know I'm an engineer.
yeah.
Cars are extremely inefficient when you make them start and stop, start and stop. So it seems like we want to be climate friendly, but we keep making decisions that kind of messes over.
But yeah, I agree that if you have to walk a mile to get to a bus stop, I'm not gonna walk a mile to get to a bus stop.
Well, we tell our kids that we walked a mile every day in the snow, uphill both ways.
Well, I
So, I mean,
actually walked in snow, but not uphill both ways to and from school. But that was
Yeah.
back then. We didn't have.
I was
school
younger then.
buses. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
Neanderthal back then, yeah.
Yeah.
I know everybody's on the same page here, but I'm just gonna give you an example because it's something that I can relate to. When you look at the parking standard and you have a grocery store, which I have little experience with, and it is 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet, right? And to give you perspective on that, a doctor's office is 3.9 spaces per 1,000 feet. I can just tell you that 4 spaces per 1,000 feet for a grocery store wouldn't cover the employees, let alone any customers. And so if this is a direction we end up going, we're probably gonna be starved for services for a long time. And, you might think that, well, people will come anyhow. It takes an awful lot of customers to make a retail operation work. And they can't all walk and take the bus.
Now, this brings to mind, and you would know about this, Chair Stephenson. So when I am in Condon, the store is smaller. It seems to have most of what I want, but it's smaller. Is there something prohibitively expensive in city environments like this to having smaller stores more spread out and closer to individuals? Or is that not even a concept that would ever work?
Smaller stores. You can have a smaller store, but one of the issues is you've got to have X critical mass to make it work.
Is that because of taxes and?
No, it's because of margin, really. Okay, the margins are so tight that you've got to have, like a small grocery store, you're talking like 15,000 people a week. Okay, that's a lot.
Right.
That type of thing. So it takes more of a mass, but at the end of the day too, it's like when you're looking at a store, okay, what do your customers want? If they want a bakery, that takes more space. Large produce department takes more space. Things takes more space, so eventually to give the community what you want, the store gets a little bigger.
How do small towns do it? They just don't have quite the amenities or?
They don't have as many amenities, and it's also, obviously, your pricing's a little bit different. The closer you get in the metro area, the more competitive things get.
That makes sense.
So it gets a little harder. And, I always tell people when a store goes in, nobody eats more. It just gets split up kind of amongst the players a little bit more. So when you add, like a Winco or somebody comes in, or a Trader Joe's or something, it just kind of splits the pie down a little bit more.
Chair Stephenson?
Commissioner Wilcox.
I'm having trouble following your math. You said four spaces per 1,000 square feet of store, right?
Right.
Okay, I think the old Safeway, the Cherry Park on, the Safeway on Cherry Park, I think that's 50,000 square feet. So my calculation shows 200 spaces. Is my math correct?
Uh, Yes. That would be 200.
Okay, that seems like a fair amount of parking to me.
So I guess what I'm saying is for a smaller unit, I'm sorry, not like a 50,000 square foot unit. Let's say you had a 5,000 square foot store. Okay, that would be 22 parking spaces. Total.
Okay, well, we shop at Natural Grocers and they don't have much of a parking lot at all, but they manage.
Pardon me?
We shop at Natural Grocers on Burnside and they don't have much of a parking lot, but they manage.
And I wanted also just to really clarify here that if you take a look at that map, that is on page 80 in the packet. So the city can't require minimum parking mandates in this area. However, people can, if a developer comes in and they choose to build a store and they know that they're gonna need, 50 parking spaces, for their business, they're gonna choose, putting in the amount of parking that's needed to operate their business. I don't think they're gonna, not put in the parking. I think we kind of need to look at I just want to be clear on, I don't want us to always take the worst the worst approach of things. Sure, things will happen. That very well something can come in and they'll say, we don't want any parking.
Right.
That, it may happen. As staff too, when we get these development applications in, we always let them know, hey, this is what our old code said about parking. This is what we really recommend for parking standards here in Troutdale. We're on the edge of the UGB. People have cars. People get around this community in cars. And I really think people who are developing properties understand that.
Commissioner Allen?
So Chair Stephenson, you probably have more understanding about this than I do, but it's been my experience that developers come in, build a development, get their money, and they're typically gone on to the next development. And then whoever's there after them trying to run a business and earn a living, if they can't get enough trips, they go out of business, and then it's the next one. But by then, the developer's long gone. They don't always hold on to it. And so my concern is that we have lots of examples around us, especially as you get closer to Portland, where you can't find a parking spot to do business, so they just don't go. There's pressure on whoever's trying to run that business.
I guess I would say, I think there's no magic bullet, and I'm not trying to be woe is me, but it is like we've got a minimum and we have a maximum.
It's finding that balance.
And so if it's like, we can put in as much as we want, then there shouldn't be a maximum. But conversely to that, we're talking about, the state has said, well, the developers are gonna put in what they need. Well, if that's the case, why did we have 30 years of parking regulations, minimums? If they were going to put in what they needed anyhow, why did we regulate parking so much for the last 30 years? I don't know the answer to that. If they were gonna put in, why did we say you had to put in 2 spots, before, because we didn't think they would put in any. And now we're like, well, we know they'll put in 2, so we don't have to do anything. I think some will, some won't. I think like anything, you've got a situation there. But I will say, okay, there's a lot of reasons that you have vacant buildings and empty storefronts all over the place. There's a ton of reasons why businesses and malls and whatever don't make it. So I'm not trying to say this is why, I'm just saying this isn't going to help the situation, in my opinion. I wouldn't say this is gonna help business just thrive in our town. And that's a bold statement, I know, but I just am like, I think it makes it harder.
I've been seeing more and more of that, and I think it's because we're forcing it.
What?
We're forcing the way they're doing their developments and incentivizing the way they're doing development that doesn't make economic sense, so you end up with all these empty storefronts. Because if you look around, you're seeing more and more of them.
And that could be, like I said, that can be a lot of factors. And there's no magic bullet.
But you were seeing it when we weren't in the recessions.
Shirley, do you have a question?
When I travel, because I go to a meeting at the East Community Center, I see more and more people parking up on the sidewalk, on the street. You can't, why somebody doesn't go and ticket them, because they can't walk down the street. They're halfway in the bike lane. I mean, it's just a mess. And it isn't and it's because there's not enough parking. And they're on a main transit route. And I can say on any given day, when I'm traveling down there, I see people that ride the bus, but they're not in great numbers. They're like maybe 1 or 2 here, and you go 5 or 6 stops and there's 1 or 2. So my question is that when you limit parking, people will find a place to park. And it isn't gonna be where you want them to park.
Right, so what I think is gonna happen, and we're already starting to see this, and we're having a conversation right now with our downtown parking study that's taking place, is how do we manage parking overall, or in certain pockets of areas of cities or in places that have parking concerns, parking issues. How do we manage that parking? And there's a lot of different ways parking can be managed. It can be managed through better signage. It could be managed through parking enforcement. It could be managed in a way where employees, if they work in the area, they have to get a parking permit. And the same goes, for people who might live in a certain area, they might need to get a residential parking permit. So there's a lot of different ways to manage parking, and I think we're just going, as we move forward, as all cities, as we move forward with these new rules, we're gonna have to be thinking of different ways to manage parking, and what are the best ways to manage parking in our communities, because it's not going to be a cookie cutter approach. Every city is different, right? It's just finding what's going to work.
Well, and I'm just, not to say this enough, but I'm seeing this with with the home forward development going in, that's gonna be even a bigger issue than we have now. And so we need, like you said, we need to either figure out a better way to solve the parking issue with, I don't think we need a maximum, but the state evidently thinks we need a maximum. So even at a maximum, I don't think we're gonna get enough. Especially if it's, workforce housing, because it's not required.
Well, and I think it's just hard because I hear the state saying we're going to reduce barriers and red tape and make the process easier for development. And then I see this and I'm just like, this doesn't seem like it's consistent with that message. I mean, maybe it is and I'm just missing it, but it doesn't seem that we're making it easier. It seems like we're putting more regs in.
All I can say
Is-
that there's always inherent conflict. There's always going to be trade-offs in what you do, right?
Yeah.
And when those trade-offs occur, we're just gonna have to take a different approach. And we're gonna have to, we're gonna have to start looking at parking differently and how we can manage parking more efficiently and effectively throughout our communities.
Commissioner Wilcox?
No, nothing else right now.
I see it as a war on cars without a workable alternative.
So what I can tell you, what I'm gonna do for the April meeting, I'm gonna go back and kind of make these updated changes I have been finding and discussing with folks that also have their eyes on this document. I will go back and take a look at our GIS system as well and kind of look at this map and making sure that we have it buffered correctly in our system. And then we'll have kind of a new packet and we can kind of then at our April 9th meeting, we can just run through
And
all the changes. And Paul, I would really appreciate what you have, like I said, in the next week or two.
Because we're gonna have to enforce this and staff's gonna have to enforce this, can we get some of these, like, where definitions aren't consistent, can we get those maybe ironed out? Possibly?
Do you mean with like the definition of like frequent transit route?
Yeah,
yeah,
I just don't know how you have a different definition for the state than the state has. Okay,
then
you see what I mean?
Oh, the state has a different definition than TriMet.
No, the state transportation has a different definition for frequent transit than what is in 660.
Correct.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's like,
so which do we use?
We use what's in the transportation planning rule, what is in 660,
okay.
because that's the requirement.
Okay.
All right, and I guess we'll take public comment too. Any members of the public wishing to comment on this item? Sandy, no? Okay. I thought we were gonna hear from her. And Frank, no, nothing? Okay. All right,
Thank you, Bill.
yeah, thank you.
It was nice to have both,
Very helpful.
yes. I like the matrix.
Yeah.
That helped me a lot.
really good.
I always have to do that code audit piece when changing the code.
I like it. I like it.
You have to do it or you do
I
it?
personally have to do it.
Okay, this
Oh,
is,
it's exquisite, let me tell you.
this is a wonderful addition, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else likes it, but
Oh,
I thought it
I
was great. I thought
love
was
it, okay?
Anytime you feel that way.
Go
do
for it.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
more the merrier.
We won't complain.
Nope.
I don't want to get lost in, the code requirements, so it keeps everything on.
No,
No, I like it.
yeah, it's great.
Good.
Granted, I'm an opinionated creature, but we make the best we can of what we have to work with.
That's right.
And if we just accepted it, you wouldn't respect us as much.
So we're highly respected.
Isn't that true? Back to you.
Staff communications, the Confluence, the RFQ that we put out in late January, early February, the proposals are due for that on April 4th. So TCAB is going to be busy over the next couple of months, kind of reviewing those proposals, thinking about who they would want on an interview panel, and kind of what those interview questions are going to be, and taking their recommendations to the Urban Renewal Board. We have a wildfire safety fair coming up on April 5th at 1 o'clock at Llewellyn Park in the Sandy Palisades neighborhood. The city received a grant from the Oregon State Fire Marshal's office, and we are taking some of that money and kind of doing an educational fair. And we have a lot of good speakers coming out. The Gresham Fire District will be there. We have the Oregon State Fire Marshal's office, of course, and then we have the Office of Emergency Management of Multnomah County, and they'll be talking about ways in which we can mitigate wildfire and or home fire risk in our communities. And the third and the last thing I want to chat about is I sent this to all boards and all committees, boards, and commissions within the city, but we have an online open house right now for the Sandy River Shuttle Project, and it's up online, I believe, until April 18th, 17th. I'm so
It's
bad with,
somewhere in there.
I'm so bad with dates. I think maybe the 17th. And we are really encouraging people to take that survey and to feel free to pass it on to your friends and family here in Troutdale that might be interested in taking it. Yep. That's a wrap from staff tonight.
I probably should explain the reason why I'm so opinionated is more from an engineering standpoint. I look at decisions that happen and realize that they're actually going to exacerbate or increase the problem instead of helping the problem. And so I'm not good with illogic, but I apologize for that.
Commissioner Wilcox.
It might take a few minutes. You want to save me for later or go for it now?
You go ahead and go.
Well, it's still relatively fresh in our minds. I want to revisit the LU 7517, the code amendments related to the marijuana measure and the coding for that. I want to go back to, I guess, 6 weeks now when the council had the first reading before them. And they had a ordinance that had some language in it that was kind of similar to what the findings of fact had originally, where it made it sound like the changes were complying with the measure, which was the opposite of what was intended. So for the second reading, 2 weeks later, that came before council, there was a completely different ordinance. And there was, in that ordinance, there was a ORS reference there was a typo, which City Attorney Ed Tromke took responsibility for. But what I'm getting at is neither one of those ordinances came before the Planning Commission for review. And it's the ordinance that implements the change. It's not the staff report or the findings of fact. So if we're forwarding something, or if something's being forwarded in our name as being recommended, but we're not seeing that, I have a problem with that. And I also wondered, who's writing the ordinances? Is Ed Trumke involved in that, or is that a coordinated effort between planning and legal, or what's going on with that?
It's staff.
So it's coordinated between staff and legal. So typically we will take the first cut of writing the ordinance, and then we'll pass it on to legal for their review and final edits before those ordinances are placed in the council packet. Paul, I have worked in other communities where when there is a legislative amendment before the Planning Commission, we will have a draft ordinance actually in their packet. That's not part of the findings that the Planning Commission adopts, but at least it's a draft ordinance that can be reviewed and commented on as part of the land use case file. And we could, if that's something that the Planning Commission would like staff to do, we can certainly do that. I don't have a problem putting in, a draft ordinance with those legislative amendments.
So for clarification, then that would come out with the packet, and then when we wrote our findings and made our recommendation, we could say, and we support draft ordinance, blah, 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 through this process. So that would be us approving that document that we
Or,
see.
recommending that ordinance for the first reading.
Us recommending it to council to be approved. How's everybody feel about that? I think that would be better than trying to get it after the fact.
Yeah.
It'd be much easier to do it up front than try to change it after they adopt it.
I would agree.
We won't have, so in that draft ordinance that comes to the Planning Commission, there'll be certain dates left out because we won't know those dates.
Right.
So there'll be kind of some missing information, but it's nothing that's going to be substantive, like in nature, when it comes to what is the intent of the ordinance that you're adopting.
And it would be a lot more than we have now.
Correct.
I agree.
How's that?
Sounds good.
Okay, let's try that. Okay,
Thanks, Commissioner Wilcox.
Okay.
keep going.
I had some other things I'd like to talk about in future meetings, but I'll go ahead and let's see.
Okay, you want to do those now?
Let me just touch on them. One is the MU3 building height going from 35 to 55 feet. I'm seeing that's, well, let me go ahead and read it. I've got it right in front of me. On page TDC 320, it says building heights of up to 55 feet shall be subject to a type 2 site development review. I'm curious how a site development review, how that compares, how is that different from a variance? I mean, we don't have to discuss it now. That's just the question I had on that subject.
That is the question, and I thought we made those threes, no?
What's that?
Let's bring this topic back to a future meeting. I'm putting it on kind of a parking lot agenda for the commission.
Okay.
Okay. The other one I had was looking at some of the standards that are subject to variances. I know Commissioner Menkoff has touched on this more than once, where you have standards and then you grant a variance to that standard. And I know he's questioned, well, maybe there's a problem with the standard. If I'm misquoting you, correct me, Kevin. I'll give you a couple examples that I ran across. And some of this actually applies to the East Cherry Park apartment complex project. The balcony variance, for example, I think the Troutdale standard is 60 square feet. They went to 42. The Gresham standard is 64 square feet, I think. Fairview's is 48. Another example would be the parking space standard for a curb space in Troutdale is 22 feet. Fairview and Gresham are both 24 feet. So I'm getting at is the standards are totally arbitrary, and it's just something I'd like to look at. And a couple other items related to the Cherry Park apartment development was how orientation is determined. Like, you called 257th the front of that project, but the buildings both faced either north or south. So the what anybody would call the backyard was technically the side yard for setback purposes. And then also variations in setback requirements. If they hadn't gotten the variance on the north side reducing it from 20 to 15 feet, they would have been at 20 feet. But on the south side, they were allowed to go 5 feet because it was HDR next door. So you could have had the north side building with a 20-foot backyard and the south side building with a 5-foot backyard. And that didn't make a lot of sense to me. Maybe they could get more rent for the ones on the north side. At 4 times the backyard. So those are the kinds of things I'd like to see addressed in the future.
Okay.
And that's all I have, I think.
Okay, thank you, sir. Commissioner Minkoff.
Is this where we're going around the room or just on this one item
No, we are going around the room.
to wrap up?
Yeah.
Well, so at the risk of sticking my foot in my mouth again, which I'm embarrassed already that I didn't make the comment. Let me just explain for the record. I'm very frustrated with what happens at the CAC. Having been on that committee for almost 2 years, in those 2-year period, the CAC, what I see, and I can just give you a metaphor, they're all sitting in a rowboat with no motor and no oars and no rudder. And they're floating around trying to figure out what is their purpose. What are we supposed to be doing? How are we going to do it? They really need help. Really. They need guidance from the Planning Commission, from City Council. They're reading all of this documentation that comes in from Oregon, we've been looking at other cities' charters, planning documents, whatever, that include a CAC, and honest to God, they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. They come in here and that was I was reacting from a place of frustration. They really need, honestly, they ought to have somebody that from the planning commission, Tanny, you, somebody from city council, come in to a CAC meeting and help us craft how we can be of service. You know, if the timeline is so short that trying to gather public opinion is impractical, well, then we won't waste our time. But what else are we supposed to be doing? And I'm going to pass this back to Paul and say he knows I've expressed my frustration to Paul as well, saying, particularly this last year, we've done nothing. So anyway, my outburst was uncalled for because it was out of line. I misunderstood what you were saying, but just by explanation, I want to say that I'm frustrated with the CAC. And I'm trying to help them with my own opinions and suggestions, and they really need some help. They need some guidance. Thank you.
No, and I'll just respond to that briefly. I appreciate that. I don't know what the answer is or if there's really an easy answer. I know there's sometimes that the CAC is swamped. They've got more work than they know what to do with.
Not lately, not in this last year. They've had
No,
nothing.
not this last year, but in prior times, they've been quite busy.
Okay.
And I know in the 3 years that I was on there, it seemed like we were pretty busy. And
Well, but city processes haven't changed, so they should still be busy.
well, not necessarily, because like an example is when we're doing things like master plans, everybody's busy. And then where there's a year or two where we're not doing master plans for a reason of, one, we can't afford to buy them, so we're not doing them, or two, we've already done them, everybody's not as busy.
Okay.
And so, I mean, some of these things, it's like when we're doing these code things, I feel like, to me, we're swamped. A lot of times I'm like, you know, I'm trying to get it off to council and then make sure it doesn't look like a kangaroo when it comes out of council, you know? So I don't know that there's an easy answer. I mean, I really appreciate your challenge because I hadn't thought of it that way. Because I always think there's things that all of us can do to make the city better. And I think sometimes we just have to figure out the best way to do that and make sure that everybody's working for the same cause, we're all on the same page and the council's good with it, you know, and then we can all move forward effectively. Because I mean, there is no doubt in my mind that we're all looking for the same thing at the end of the day.
Right. I agree.
Appreciate
Thank you.
I noticed that they're getting ready to, slow down 257th with construction. They're putting, a friend of mine I walk with thought they were putting up the little, barriers for runoff because it's gonna rain. And I had to tell her it was because they're doing a reconstruction of 257. So please pay attention. People are driving way too fast past the workers that are working. It only takes a split second for you to not notice one of them and hit them. So please, especially on 257, be kind and move over or slow down and be patient. Because it's gonna be a while before they're done. and it's gonna be a whole new view of 257. So be prepared, but if you need to get to work, leave a little earlier or leave a little later from work. That way you'll get home safer.
And next to the largest high school in the state,
Right,
with lots of new drivers.
so be patient. I noticed when I was coming down, a guy passed me going 60 on 257. I wish he would have slowed down, but there was no one to stop him, so what can I say? So just be patient. Because I know they're parking in our neighborhood, they'll be parking in our neighborhood, and just be patient, and you will get out. Or do a different route to get out. And other than that, thank you, staff, as always, great presentation. I love the matrix, so good job.
Thank you, Commissioner Prickett. Couple of things. The first one, the Stark Street Bridge opened last week. And those of you that use it are excited, or you should be excited. And those of you that don't use it, you are missing something. So just go down there and drive over it just so you can say that you did. But that is a great thing. It's going to help the traffic on the Columbia River Highway and through Troutdale. There's been quite a bit more, if you've noticed, in the 6 months that's been closed, but it is repaired and it is safe and it is opened, and that is a great thing. We did hear last night about some of the changes on 257th. And if you've seen the big reader boards,
Oh, yeah.
you know that, and if you haven't seen them, you're probably driving too fast. But this work should all be completed by the end of the year, and it's pretty significant. It is sidewalks and bike lane and street, right?
Street
lights,
Lighting.
Oh,
new street lighting,
hallelujah.
and paving,
Well, they need to pave it.
which will be really good. But while this construction goes on, it is going to be a little bit challenging. I do know they're going to try to move a lot of the traffic into the center lane while they're working, that left turn refuge that's there. So everybody, please just slow down and be careful, and it'll be better when it's done. But it's going to take us a little while to get there. Okay. And I appreciate the work the staff's done on this, and I apologize for any of my frustration with the state, but I do find this to be a very conflicting message. And I wish you'd just say this is how you want it done, and have it be consistent and enforceable and make sense to the community, because I think that's what they expect too. And also too, as you know, and this is getting talked about more and more, our police service contract with Multnomah County is up at the end of June, and our fire contract with Gresham Fire is up at the end of June. And no, that doesn't mean the contracts are going to expire and everything's going to stop, but there's a lot of work going on to work these contracts going forward, and what that service looks like and what it costs. And these, frankly, are significant cost increases. And so please, get it known to the council and the budget committee what your feelings are about these things, how you feel about those services, and what you think the priorities for the city should be. Because we need to hear from you when we're making these decisions as far as where you want to see us spend your tax dollars most effectively. And with that, does anyone have any final comments? Public?
Just
Sure.
that building height determines how expensive of a fire engine you need to buy. Some first to consider.
Yes. That's a good point. Any final comments? You good? Sandy, it's very good to see you. Where is she? There she comes. She left.
Oh, there she is.
There she is. We have a chair for you, okay? We miss having you on council.
I wish I could say I miss being there.
You did a lot of good work.
You've done a lot of great work, and we're looking forward to drafting you in the future for other positions, okay? Notice I didn't say volunteering, drafted, okay? But thank you for your service to the city, really appreciate it. Okay, and unless anybody has anything else, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second?
Okay, motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.